Ladies and gentlemen, let me open with a sobering thought. We are closer today to the possibility of a nuclear conflict than at any time since the Cold War. NATO and Russia are locked in a dangerous escalation that could spin out of control at any moment. Now, I'm not here to spread fear for fear's sake. I'm here to sound the alarm because ignoring reality is the most dangerous thing we can do. History is filled with moments when arrogance and bad policy pushed nations over the edge, and I fear we're walking that same path right now. Awareness is power, and yet it is the one thing most people neglect in moments of great danger. Human beings have a tendency to look away from uncomfortable truths, to trust authority, to believe that somehow everything will work itself out. But history has never rewarded denial, and it certainly won't now as NATO and Russia edge closer to a conflict that could redefine the world order. Pretending the threat does not exist will not shield you from its consequences. In fact, it's the very act of ignoring reality that leaves people vulnerable, exposed, and powerless when events finally break through the walls of illusion. This is why I say, with urgency and conviction, you must wake up to reality before it's too late. The cost of ignorance will be far higher than the cost of awareness. Think about it. Every great crisis in history blindsided the majority, not because the signs weren't there, but because the signs were ignored. In the run up to the 2008 financial crisis, the warning lights were flashing. Debt levels were soaring, housing prices were unsustainable, credit markets were stretched to the breaking point. Yet the vast majority of people kept buying, kept borrowing, kept living as if the party would never end. When the crash came, it was swift, devastating, and unforgiving. The same psychology is at play today, except this time the stakes are not just financial, they are existential. When the world's largest military alliance pushes head with a nuclear superpower, pretending this is just politics as usual is more than not V. It is dangerous. The hook here is simple. Awareness doesn't make you weak. It makes you powerful. By confronting the truth, you give yourself options. You can prepare. You can adjust. You can make decisions today that shield you from the worst tomorrow. People often say ignorance is bliss, but bliss only lasts until the consequences arrive. Then ignorance becomes the heaviest burden of all. The leaders in Washington and Brussels might speak with confidence, but confidence is not competence. Their track record is one of reckless spending, short-term thinking, and arrogance in the face of reality. Believing their promises that everything is under control is like trusting the captain of a sinking ship because he insists the water rushing in is no cause for alarm. What happens if sanctions backfire? What happens if energy markets collapse under the weight of geopolitics? What happens if one miscalculation triggers escalation are not abstract concerns? They are real possibilities that demand preparation. But only those who are aware will have the presence of mind to act before events spiral beyond control. Awareness forces you to see that our economic system is already stretched thin by unsustainable debt, that inflation is eroding your purchasing power, and that the currency you trust is losing credibility worldwide. Combine that fragility with the threat of military escalation, and the danger multiplies. Yet within that danger lies opportunity for those who are awake. When the majority finally realizes what's happening, it will be too late for them to react. Markets move quickly, currencies collapse suddenly, wars escalate overnight. Awareness gives you the head start others will never have. It lets you prepare while there is still time to secure your wealth, diversify your assets, and protect your family from the fallout of poor leadership and reckless policies. Being aware doesn't mean living in fear. It means living with clarity, living with the courage to act, and refusing to let others dictate your fate. If you want to survive and thrive in an uncertain world, awareness is your first weapon. It sharpens your mind, steadies your emotions, and gives you the advantage when chaos erupts. The choice is stark. You either keep your eyes closed and hope the storm passes you by, or you open them wide, see the storm approaching, and take cover before it hits. Awareness is the difference between being a victim of circumstance and being a master of resilience. That is why I urge you, with all the seriousness this moment demands, to wake up now, to shake off the illusions, and to claim the power that awareness gives you. Because once the world crosses the line into crisis, there will be no second chances for those who refuse to see what was coming. Don't trust false comforts, because they are the most dangerous traps in moments of crisis. Leaders, institutions know that fear is contagious, so they work overtime to keep the public calm. Even if it means feeding them lies, they assure you that inflation is transitory, that debt is manageable, that sanctions are working, and that diplomacy will always prevent the unthinkable. These are soothing words designed to buy time, not to tell you the truth. The harsh reality is that these false comforts delay preparation, disarm people mentally, and set them up for devastation when the truth finally shatters the illusion. Trusting them is like being told by a doctor that the tumor is nothing to worry about, just so you'll leave the office smiling. Meanwhile, the disease spreads unchecked. Throughout history, governments have relied on this strategy. Before every crisis, the people in charge tell citizens that everything is fine, even when the cracks are visible. Before the Great Depression, markets were hailed as invincible. Before the 2008 financial collapse, housing prices were said to never fall. Before every major war, there were promises that conflict could be contained. And yet, the same pattern repeats. Reassurances come first, catastrophe comes second. Why? Because leaders fear panic more than they fear collapse. They want the public to remain obedient, trusting, and blind while they scramble behind the scenes to protect their own interests. That is the cruel irony of false comfort. It protects the system, not the people. Here is the hook: when you reject false comforts, you reclaim your independence. You stop letting others decide what version of reality you are allowed to see. You recognize that comforting narratives are designed to keep you passive, while uncomfortable truths are the ones that give you real power. The Federal Reserve, for instance, has built its credibility on reassuring the public that it can manage inflation, control interest rates, and stimulate growth at will. But look at their track record. They never see the crashes coming, and they always respond too late. So why should you trust them now? Why should you believe that printing trillions of dollars won't destroy the value of your currency? Why should you take comfort in the idea that sanctions will cripple Russia without blowing back onto Western economies? These are not rational beliefs. They are convenient fictions. The danger is that false comforts keep you asleep while the storm gathers strength. If you trust the narrative that inflation is temporary, you won't act to protect your savings. If you believe the conflict between NATO and Russia will calm down, you won't prepare for the global economic shock a war could trigger. If you buy into the illusion that governments can borrow endlessly without consequence, you'll hold assets that collapse when the bubble bursts. The cost of believing in these comforts is not just financial, it's personal. It's the loss of security, stability, and peace of mind when reality finally intrudes. Think about the people who bought into the comfort of the housing boom. They were told real estate was safe, that prices always rise, that owning more properties was the road to wealth. They trusted the system, and many lost everything. The same is happening today with the dollar, with the stock market, with blind faith in central banks and global alliances. Those who are clinging to the illusion will pay the price, while those who see through it will be prepared. That is the dividing line between victims and survivors in times of crisis. Here's another hook: rejecting false comfort is not pessimism, it's empowerment. When you stop listening to empty reassurances, you open your mind to real strategies, real protections, and real solutions. You begin to think critically about your finances, your security, and your future. You realize that gold and silver are not old relics, but timeless stores of value. You understand that diversification isn't fear-driven, it's survival-driven. You see that questioning authority is not rebellion, it's responsibility. The very act of rejecting false comfort forces you to take action, and action is the antidote to fear. The most dangerous phrase you can ever accept is, "Don't worry, it will all be fine." That phrase has preceded every major disaster in modern history. Leaders say it because it keeps people docile, because it prevents unrest, and because it gives the illusion of stability. But you are not powerless, and you do not need to be fooled. You can look beyond the surface, beyond the polished speeches, beyond the soothing lies, and see reality for what it is. That clarity is priceless, because when the aid finally crumbles, those who trusted the comfort will be left in shock, while those who rejected it will already be steps ahead, ready for what comes next. Economic strength is survival, and yet most people don't truly grasp what that means until it's too late. In times of peace and stability, we often assume money is just numbers on a screen, that wealth can be printed, borrowed, or manipulated into existence. But when crisis strikes, whether it's a financial collapse, a geopolitical shock, or the unthinkable threat of war, suddenly the illusion falls apart, and only real, tangible strength determines who weathers the storm and who is crushed by it. That's why I stress over and over again that survival is not about hope, it's about preparation. And preparation begins with building genuine economic strength, not relying on the empty promises of governments and central banks. Here's the truth: wars are not fought only with missiles, tanks, and soldiers. Wars are fought with money. Every bullet, every jet, every tank requires funding. Empires do not collapse because they run out of armies. They collapse because they run out of resources to sustain them. Look back at history. Rome fell not only because of invasions, but because its currency was debased and its economy could no longer support its reach. The Soviet Union collapsed not only because of political fractures, but because its economic model could not compete in a prolonged struggle. Today, NATO and Russia stand toe-to-toe, but behind the military posturing lies a deeper contest: who has the stronger economy, who has the more resilient system, who can survive the longest without crumbling under their own weight. If governments measure survival by economic strength, why shouldn't individuals do the same? If nations collapse without real wealth to back them, what makes you think households are any different? When your savings are trapped in paper currencies that lose value daily, when your retirement depends on markets inflated by debt and manipulation, when your entire financial life is tied to a system already stretched thin, you are setting yourself up for failure when the storm arrives. You cannot build resilience on a foundation of sand. True economic strength is about holding value that lasts assets that are immune to the lies of politicians and the manipulations of central banks. Gold and silver, real estate that produces income, businesses that generate cash flow, these are the pillars of survival. Because when the dollar falls, when inflation erodes purchasing power, when governments scramble to inflate away their debts, only those holding real assets will stand tall. You don't need to wait until disaster strikes to learn this lesson. You can act now, and that action is what separates the prepared from the vulnerable. Think about it this way. If war between NATO and Russia escalates, the ripple effects won't be limited to battlefields. Energy prices will skyrocket, global trade routes will be disrupted, and currencies will face immense pressure. Do you think the U.S. dollar, already weakened by decades of reckless borrowing and printing, will magically remain strong under such strain? Of course not. The dollar is living on borrowed time, and war could accelerate its decline. Those who hold their wealth in nothing but paper will see their purchasing power vanish, while those who have fortified themselves with real assets will not only survive, they may thrive in the chaos. Another hook: the crisis is not coming someday. It is already here in slow motion. Inflation is already eating away at your savings. Interest rates are already exposing the fragility of our debt-driven economy. Sanctions and geopolitical tensions are already redrawing alliances and undermining the dominance of the dollar. The fuse is lit, and every day it burns shorter. Waiting for the explosion to prepare is not strategy, it's suicide. Building economic strength today is not optional, it's the only path to resilience. This isn't just about money, it's about freedom. When your financial life depends entirely on the policies of central banks and governments, you are at their mercy. They can inflate your savings away, tax your assets, freeze your accounts, and leave you with nothing. But when you take control, when you convert paper promises into tangible value, you reclaim your independence. Economic strength means you are not a hostage to political failure. It means you can face the storm with confidence because you know your foundation cannot be wiped away by a single reckless decision in Washington or Brussels. The most powerful nations know survival depends on economic strength. The most resilient individuals know the same. Don't wait for another crisis to prove this truth. Don't wait until your purchasing power evaporates, until the markets collapse, until the headlines confirm what I'm telling you today. By then, it will be too late. Build strength now, not tomorrow. Because in a world where NATO and Russia stand on the brink, where currencies are under siege, and where leadership has abandoned responsibility, only those who build true economic power will have the ability to survive, adapt, and seize the opportunities hidden in chaos. Prepare, don't panic. Those words can be the dividing line between collapse and resilience, between despair and strength. Panic is the natural response when uncertainty grows, when headlines scream of war, economic turmoil, and collapsing systems. Panic is emotion unleashed without direction, and emotion without control never builds. It only destroys. Preparation, however, is the disciplined response, the rational decision to confront risk head on and turn fear into strategy. The truth is that crises will come, markets will fall, currencies will devalue, leaders will make mistakes. And the threat of geopolitical conflict, like NATO and Russia standing at the edge of nuclear confrontation, will continue to hang over us. None of that is under your control. What you can control is how you respond and whether you let panic paralyze you or preparation empower you. The people who panic always lose. The people who prepare always lead. History proves it time and time again. When markets collapse, Those who panic sell everything at the bottom. Those who prepared beforehand, diversifying, holding real assets, building liquidity, emerge stronger when recovery comes. When inflation erodes savings, those who panic watch helplessly as prices rise beyond their reach. Those who prepared by owning gold, silver, and real value see their wealth preserved and sometimes even expanded, while others are scrambling just to survive. Preparation is not about predicting the future perfectly. It's about having the resilience to survive whatever future arrives. Panic thrives in blindness. It feeds on denial until reality forces itself into view, and by then, choices are limited. Think of the empty supermarket shelves during the early days of the pandemic. Those who had prepared calmly months earlier had no need to panic. They had food, supplies, and security because they thought ahead. Those who waited until panic set in were left fighting crowds, paying inflated prices, and dealing with shortages. The same principle applies at every level of crisis, whether it's personal, economic, or geopolitical. The choice is simple: prepare early and calmly, or panic late and desperately. Preparation is power disguised as peace of mind. It removes the uncertainty that fuels anxiety because you know you've done what you can to shield yourself. Panic is noise. Preparation is silence. Panic reacts. Preparation acts. And when the world descends into chaos, the prepared individual becomes the calm presence others look to for leadership. Imagine NATO and Russia escalating conflict, markets crashing overnight, and the dollar plunging in value. Millions will panic, glued to screens, unsure of what to do. But the prepared individual will already have taken steps: diversified assets, reduced debt, secured tangible stores of value. They won't need to ask, what now? Because they've already answered that question in advance. The financial system we live under encourages panic because it keeps people unprepared. Central banks tell you inflation is under control until it isn't. Politicians tell you debt doesn't matter until it does. Leaders insist war will be avoided until conflict erupts. Each false assurance builds complacency, and complacency is fertile ground for panic when reality shatters the illusion. Preparation breaks that cycle. It gives you control in a world designed to strip you of it. It is the quiet rebellion against leaders who would prefer you dependent, helpless, and reactive. Think about the difference in mindset. Panic says, I can't handle this. I'm trapped. Preparation says, I've already planned for this. I know my options. Panic sees only problems. Preparation sees opportunities. Panic sells gold at the bottom. Preparation buys it long before the bottom arrives. Panic clings to collapsing assets. Preparation moves into strength before the collapse. And here's the most powerful hook: panic guarantees regret, but preparation guarantees confidence. Even if the worst never comes, you never regret being ready. In an age where NATO and Russia flirt with nuclear war, where the U.S. economy is built on debt quicksand, where inflation erodes trust in money itself, preparation is no longer a luxury. It is survival. And survival is not fear-driven. It is clarity-driven. Don't let anyone tell you that preparing is paranoid or pessimistic. What's truly dangerous is ignoring reality and hoping panic will somehow save you. It never does. Preparation turns fear into foresight, foresight into strategy, and strategy into resilience. The world may descend into crisis, but you do not have to descend with it. You can rise above, not because you trusted empty promises, but because you had the courage to prepare when others laughed, ignored, or delayed. That is how you transform uncertainty into opportunity, and that is how you survive storms that will sweep away the unprepared. Demand leadership, not illusions, because illusions are the currency of failing systems. They are the stories leaders tell to distract the public from the truth, to keep them calm while the ground beneath their feet is crumbling. Leadership is about honesty, courage, and foresight. Illusions are about denial, comfort, and delay. Right now, as NATO and Russia walk dangerously close to nuclear confrontation, the difference between leadership and illusion could mean the survival of millions. Yet what do we see? Leaders offering reassurances instead of solutions, painting over cracks with words while ignoring the structural collapse happening in real time. They say the economy is strong while inflation eats away at paychecks. They say the dollar is safe while debt explodes to levels no nation can repay. They say the conflict can be contained while escalation intensifies by the week. That is not leadership. It is illusion dressed in confidence. Illusions can soothe for a moment, but they kill in the long run. It's like a doctor telling a patient with heart disease that all they need is rest, no treatment, no change, just comfort. It feels good to hear, but it leads to disaster. Real leadership means telling people what they don't want to hear, but need to hear. It means preparing them for sacrifice, responsibility, and hard choices. Today, we live under leaders who fear telling the truth because truth would reveal their incompetence. They prefer the illusion of control, as if printing more money, expanding more debt, or flexing more military muscle will somehow solve the very problems those actions created. If history teaches us anything, it is that illusions always collapse under the weight of reality. Before the fall of every empire, leaders insisted everything was under control. The British Empire, the Soviet Union, Rome itself, each collapsed while their rulers clung to illusions of invincibility. Today, the United States insists the dollar is unshakable. NATO insists it can keep expanding without provoking consequences. And central banks insist inflation is temporary. These are not strategies, they are illusions. And the longer they are believed, the harder the crash becomes when reality finally breaks through. Leadership, in contrast, confronts the storm head on. It does not promise that pain will be avoided, but that it will be endured with clarity and direction. It does not manipulate statistics to hide inflation. It acknowledges inflation and acts decisively to restore stability. It does not expand debt endlessly. It imposes discipline and honesty. It does not escalate conflict with reckless rhetoric. It prioritizes diplomacy grounded in reality. That is what true leadership looks like. The tragedy is that the world is running out of it, and the vacuum is being filled with illusions that put us all at risk. If you continue to accept illusions, you give up your power. When leaders tell you that debt doesn't matter and you nod along, you become complicit in your own financial ruin. When they tell you the dollar is strong and you hold all your wealth in paper, you become a victim of their lie. When they tell you global stability is guaranteed and you fail to prepare for war or disruption, you bear the cost of their illusion. Demanding leadership means refusing to be lied to. It means refusing to accept shallow comforts in place of hard truths. It means holding leaders accountable not for their words, but for their actions. Leadership is rare because it requires sacrifice. Illusions are common because they are easy. Leadership risks unpopularity by speaking hard truths. Illusions buy popularity by telling people what they want to hear. But the reward of leadership is survival and progress, while the reward of illusions is collapse. When a nation demands illusions, it gets decline. When it demands leadership, it earns resilience. The choice lies with us. Will we continue to accept illusions because they are easier, or will we demand leadership because it is necessary? The hook that should never leave your mind is this: illusions are temporary, reality is permanent. You cannot spend illusions in the market. You cannot save them for retirement. You cannot defend your family with them when currencies collapse or conflicts explode. Reality always wins, and the question is whether you will face it on your terms or on its terms. Demand leadership now, because once illusions break, it will be too late. Real leadership prepares people for storms before they hit. Illusions tell them the skies are clear until lightning strikes. In a world this dangerous, we cannot afford illusions any longer. Crisis creates opportunity, but only for those who are ready to see it. Most people see crisis as nothing but destruction, chaos, and loss. They panic, they freeze, they look only at what's being taken away. But history rewards those who look deeper, those who understand that every collapse clears the way for renewal, that every disruption opens doors that never would have been visible in stable times. The difference between those who rise and those who fall in crisis is perspective. If you only see fear, you miss the chance to turn adversity into strength. If you recognize opportunity, you gain the ability to transform uncertainty into advantage. The question is simple when the storm comes: will you be crushed under its weight, or will you rise on its winds? Think about the greatest fortunes ever built. They were not made in times of calm. They were made in times of turmoil. After the Great Depression, those who had cash and courage bought assets at pennies on the dollar and built legacies that lasted generations. After the 2008 financial collapse, those who had prepared beforehand bought gold, real estate, and undervalued stocks while others were drowning in debt and fear. Crises always redistribute wealth, always shift power, always create new realities. The unprepared see only devastation, but the prepared see a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reposition themselves. That is why I say again and again, do not let crisis paralyze you. Let it mobilize you. Here's the hook: crisis doesn't change who you are. It reveals who you are. When the world unravels, the difference between winners and losers is not luck. It's preparation and mindset. If you've built resilience, if you've diversified your wealth, if you've freed yourself from the illusions of central banks and political promises, then crisis becomes a test you are ready to pass. But if you've trusted the system, clung to the lies, and ignored the warnings, then crisis becomes a hammer that crushes everything you've built. The same storm that destroys one house can strengthen another, depending on how it was built. As NATO and Russia edge toward a confrontation with nuclear shadows, the potential fallout extends far beyond the battlefield. Supply chains could shatter, currencies could collapse, markets could nosedive. These are not just dangers. They are also signals of opportunity for the few who see clearly. If energy markets explode in price, those who position themselves in commodities will thrive. If the dollar collapses, those who secured wealth in gold and silver will not just survive, they will lead. If inflation spirals out of control, those with real assets will stand strong while others drown in worthless paper. The crisis will not treat everyone equally. It will punish the blind and reward the prepared. Another hook opportunity in crisis does not wait. It appears suddenly, it moves quickly, and it vanishes once the majority catches on. By the time the headlines declare the disaster, it's already too late to act. The shelves are empty, the assets are inflated, the safety nets are gone. That's why preparation and awareness matter so much. You can't chase opportunity after the crowd. You must move before them. Crisis will always create windows of advantage, but only the vigilant and the disciplined can step through them. The danger is that people let fear rob them of vision. Fear makes you focus only on the threat in front of you, never the path beyond it. But preparation transforms fear into foresight. Instead of asking, what if everything falls apart? You begin to ask, what will I do when things fall apart, and how will I position myself to benefit? That shift in thinking is the dividing line between the masses who suffer and the minority who rise. Opportunity does not announce itself kindly, it hides in the shadows of crisis. Only those with the courage to look into the storm can find it. This is the lesson history keeps teaching, yet most refuse to learn it. The worst times often produce the strongest people. Crisis strips away illusions. It exposes weaknesses. It tests systems. And while it destroys those who were unprepared, it elevates those who had the vision to prepare early. You cannot stop the storm, but you can decide how you will emerge from it. Crisis can be your greatest enemy or your greatest ally. The choice depends on whether you view it as the end of your security or the beginning of your opportunity.